Hare Krishna. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Shwapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Sapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Mataji, for such a melodious Manglacharan. So, Prabhuji, we are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 1, Chapter 15, and the text for today is text 39. Ritu Mataji, would you like to read the text, or you would like to just read the purport?
Just the purport, Mataji.
Okay. Path Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, we are on 1.1539. Prabhuji, is it possible for you to read the Sanskrit so that we can repeat?
Yes, Mother. Yeah.
Sanskrit.
So, Canto 1, Chapter 15 and text number 39.
Yes.
Mathurayam tatha vrajam.
Mathurayam tatha
vrajam.
Surasenapatim tataha.
Surasenapatim tataha.
Rajapatyam nirupeshtim.
Rajapatyam nirupeshtim.
Agninapida Ishwaraha.
Agninapida Ishwara.
Mathurayam tatha vrajam.
Mathurayam tatha vrajam.
Shurasenapatim tataha.
Shurasenapatim tataha.
Prajapatyam nirupeshtim.
Prajapatyam nirupeshtim.
Agnin apida Ishwaraha.
Agnin apibad Ishwaraha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'll do the word to word and translation. Mathurayam, at Mathura. Tatha, also. Vajram, Vajra. Surasena Patim, king of the Surasenas. Tataha, thereafter. Prajapatyam, Prajapatya, sacrifice. Nirupya, having performed. Isthim, goal. Agnim, fire. Apibat, placed in himself. Ishvara, capable. Translation. Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura as the king of Surasena. Afterwards, Maharaj Yudhishthira performed a Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire for quitting household life. Ritu Mataji, Hare Krishna, kindly read the purport.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Mataji. Maharaja Yudhishthira, after placing Maharaja Parikshit on an on the imperial throne of Hastinapura, and after posting Vajra, the great grandson of Lord Krishna, as the king of Mathura, accepted the renounced order of life. The system of four orders of life and four castes in terms of quality and work, known as Vanashrama Dharma, is the beginning of real human life, and Maharaja Yudhishthira, as the protector of this system of human activities, timely retired from active life as a sannyasi, handing over the charge of the administration to a trained prince, Maharaja Parikshit. The scientific system of Vanashram Dharma divides the human life into four divisions of occupations and four orders of life. The four orders of life as Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa are to be followed by all, irrespective of the occupational division. Modern politicians do not wish to retire from active life, even if they are old enough. But Yudhishthira Maharaja, as an idle king, voluntarily retired from active administration life to prepare himself for the next life. Everyone's life must be so arranged that the last stage of life, say at least the last 15 or 20 years prior to death, can be absolutely devoted to the devotional service of the Lord to attain the highest perfection of life. It is really foolishness to engage oneself all days of one's life in material enjoyment and fruitive activities, because as long as the mind remains absorbed in fruitive work for material enjoyment, there is no chance of getting out from conditional life or material bondage. No one should follow the suicidal policy of neglecting one's supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Soni Mataji, Bhaj Prabhuji, and Ritu Mataji for starting us off on such a beautiful verse. I now hand over to Bhaj Govindam Prabhuji. Prabhuji, kindly take over. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. It's nice to glorify the Bhagavatam, glorify Krishna with the devotees. It's nice. So, as I do, if we go through the chapter to understand where we're at with the verse, with the reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we see that the chapter 15 is entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. And at the beginning, we saw and heard about Arjun's position, right? His lamentation about the situation that he finds himself in, where he's got such a great relationship with Krishna, and yet Krishna has now left the planet. And we read about how Arjun attributes his wealth, his prosperity, his strength, his fame, all these things that he has so-called possession of, he attributes them all to Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And now that he's lost Krishna, he sees that he's going through so much struggle in his life now, right? He even was unable to protect the wives of Krishna, despite being such a great Kshatriya, a warrior who fought so many on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so many great warriors, personalities, but he wasn't able to protect the wives of Krishna. And so like this, he's attributing the fact that all his strength came from Krishna's presence, and all his struggles are coming from the fact that Krishna is no longer present. And then Arjuna shares with Yudhishthira Maharaj about the curse that the Yadu dynasty is going through. How the Supreme Personality of Godhead used the Yadu dynasty to kill themselves. And the reason given is to lighten the burden of the earth. And then saying this, Arjuna then starts to seek shelter of the instructions that Krishna gave him, such as those from the Bhagavad Gita. And it's interesting because when we look at the instructions, when on the battlefield, those instructions that Krishna gave Arjuna led Arjuna to fight the battle, engage in the war, when Arjuna wanted to run away. But now he's thinking about those instructions, and those same instructions are now telling him something different. Now he's seeing those instructions in the mood of, I should renounce the world. And as we know, Geshe Maharaj is one of his YouTube channels is called The Wisdom That Breathes, right? And that's exactly what this is. Depending on our time, depending on the place, depending on our circumstance, our own individual circumstances, situations, the living scriptures speak to us in different ways. On the battlefield, they spoke to Arjun by saying, fight, remembering me. And now those same instructions are telling Arjuna to renounce the world for me. So then hearing this from Arjun, then we see that Yudhishthira Maharaj is now also deciding and preparing to renounce the world. And following that, we hear how Kunti Devi is planning to renounce her material activities and just focus completely on devotional service. And then we take a step back and Shukdev Goswami starts to share about how Krishna relinquishes his body, just like a magician, yatha natha, right? Just like a magician, because ultimately Krishna and Krishna's body are one. So it's not that he quits his body, but just like a magician disappears, that's how Krishna leaves. And what happens when Krishna is leaving? Krishna is leaving on one side, and then the influence, the presence of Kali, the age of Kali, is becoming more and more manifest. And seeing this influence of Kali, Yudhishthira Maharaj decides, yeah, now is the time for me to leave the house. Now is the time for me to give up household life. And so in yesterday's verse, Nikko Prabhu shared about how, and talked about how Yudhishthira Maharaj enthroned Parikshit Maharaj on the throne of Hastinapur. And in today's verse, he's now enthroning Vajra, the great grandson of Krishna, onto the throne of Mathura. And then it's also described, and I just meant to talk about this briefly. He also describes, in the translation, it's also mentioned that Maharaj Yudhishthira performed a Prajapatya sacrifice, which Sri Prabhupada doesn't really talk about in the purport, but a Prajapatya sacrifice is basically giving up everything that we possess, just giving it away, basically. And in that way, he's placing himself in the fire for quitting household life, because ultimately household life is, it involves all these possessions and everything that we have, right? So we're quitting all of that, that's part of the sacrifice, and then he's getting ready to leave the house. So when we look at the purport, Sri Prabhupada actually says that Yudhishthira Maharaj, in quotes, accepted the renounced order of life, unquote. He's saying that he basically means that Yudhishthira Maharaj went straight to the sannyas order of life. And from this, we can see that even during Krishna's era, the varnashram system was very much active. It was very diligently followed. It's quite core to the way the culture, the way the society functioned. And actually, varnashram system is not just any ordinary social system or social order. It comes from Krishna himself. So it's not a surprise for us that it was present when Krishna was there. Now, in the modern world, we of newer generations, we think of, say, any sort of social system, any sort of hierarchical system like the varnashram system, or so we might even think of it as. We think of it as this dogmatic caste-based system. But actually, the original varnashram system, the Deva varnashram system, is a very scientific, a very well-structured, and a very applicable system for organizing society. Because when we think about it, what does organized society actually need? Right? It needs everybody to be well situated. It needs everybody to be working according to their capacity, according to their interests. And it requires everybody to live in a condition which enhances their innate qualities, right? Their innate natures. And when we compare that need of society, that need of a healthy, organized society, then we can compare it to the varnashram system. Because what is the Varnashram system? It focuses on looking at the psychophysical nature of the individuals in the society at the core. And then based on that, it looks at engaging us in a lifestyle, in an occupation that suits that psychophysical nature that we have. For example, we have certain conditionings, right, that are core to us, like conditionings that come maybe from our prarabdha karma. So karma which is manifest from our past activities. Male, female, right? The body that we're in, the male, female body, whether we're short, tall, whether we're strong in sciences, strong in arts, strong in both, all these things make up a part of our psychophysical nature. Another factor could be the balance of the feminine and masculine energies that we have. All right, so feminine energy is more oriented towards softness, being focusing on relationships, being gentle, being emotionally in tune. And then the masculine energy is more about being direct, being independent, being logical, having this sense of authority, having the sense or need of control. And when we look at that, then we can see that, okay, the Varnashram system is looking at all these different factors based on our psychophysical nature, and then situating us best based on that. It helps us identify who we are and then situates us accordingly. Because what is the Varnashram system? Right? Varnashram system is made of two things, our Varnas and the Ashram. We understand the Varnas to be of four kinds. Right? We have the Shudras, which are the workers of society. So it defines our status in society in some way, the Varna. Right? So the Shudras are like the workers. Then you've got the Vaishyas, who are like your businessmen or your profiters, right? Those who make money. Then you've got the Kshatriyas, who are inclined towards the administrative sort of work. Right? So there might be leaders of society also. And then we've got the Brahmanas, who are like your intellectual thinkers, like your scientists, your researchers, and things like that. So based on our innate occupational natures, we have certain, we're categorized in certain varnas. And then we have the ashramas, which are like our, it's like our social relationship with society. If we're relating to society or to the world in a way where we're focused on growing, on learning, then we're more aligned to the brahmachari ashram. If we're relating to the world, to the material energy where we're looking at, okay, forming relationships, we're looking at making money, having connections, then we're suited to grihastha ashram. And then if we're looking at the world and going, okay, I've got all these material attachments, I've got all these things, let me wind them down. Let me decrease my association with the material energy. Then we're transitioning from associating with the material energy to associating with, for being fully in line with the spiritual energy, which best situates us in the Vanaprastha ashram. And then we've got that ashram which is fully focused, that ashram which is no longer looking at the material world in any sort of way of enjoying, purely engaging in the material energy only to spread spiritual energy, only to engage the body, the mind, the words, and even the self in propagating spiritual energy around the world. Then that's sannyasa ashram. So you can see that according to our inclinations of the work that we perform and according to the inclinations of the type of engagement we have in the world, we can understand that where we can best situate ourselves in correspondence to the Varnashram system. And we can see that even Prabhupada says that this system is scientific. Right? It's not based on bogus speculation or by caste, or by birth, right? The caste system by birth, which, I mean, fortunately is slowly going away in India, but that was a very big prominent part for the past many decades. And in the purport of today's verse, Prabhupada actually stresses that human life means following Varnashram Dharma. Quote, the system of 4 orders of life and 4 castes in terms of quality and work, known as Varnashram Dharma, is the beginning of real human life. Unquote. And actually there's, I was just listening to Srila Prabhupada's Rath Yatra classes recently. And in one such class, it was interesting how he tied in this Varnashram system into it. And he really hammers that point home about how human life really means to follow Varnashram system. Right? So he says, and I quote, so this Krishna consciousness movement means to utilize to the best possible means this human form of life. We are coming to this human form of life in this evolutionary process from aquatics to reptiles to plants and trees, then birds and beasts, then human form of life. Out of that human form of life, and please listen carefully, out of that human form of life, there are many uncivilized form of life, just above the monkeys. But those who are civilized, civilized means those who are following the instruction of the Vedas, Varnashram Dharma. And then Prabhupada just talks a bit about what Varnashram Dharma means in terms of the 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. And then he goes on to say, these 8 divisions of human society are very scientifically adopted. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Chatur Varinam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. Bhagavad Gita 4:13. This civilized division of human society is so perfect that one can gradually, from the aquatic life, can go back to home, back to Godhead. Unquote. And that's a lecture by Srila Prabhupada on 5 July 1917, San Francisco, a Rath Yatra lecture. So we can see Srila Prabhupada really emphasizes the point that real human life, real civilized human life, comes from following a spiritually organized Varnashram system, the Deva Varnashram system. And so in the same way, we can break it down and say that actually human life only begins when we're following this Varnashram system and we're endeavoring to properly situate ourselves. And Varnashram system means that we're taking shelter of the Vedic culture and the Vedic system that Krishna set up himself. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 2nd chapter, it says, Ata pumbir dvija shreshta varnashrama vibhagashaha sanushishtasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. Translation. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. Unquote. And that's from 1-2-13, Srimad Bhagavatam. So here, even the Bhagavatam is saying that actually there are these divisions. But what's the goal? What's the aim of these divisions? What's the aim of Varnashram system? The aim is haritoshanam, which is to please Krishna. And in the purport of the verse, Srila Prabhupada actually emphasizes that point very heavily. He goes on to say that actually every civilized and social institution can only be healthy if there's some sort of social structure to it. And then he says that quote, and in each and every one of the above mentioned divisions of life, the aim must be to please the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead, unquote. So it's not that we just have to have some structure in society. The point is that that structure, that organization of society should be there to please the Lord and be there to take us to a higher place. So this Varnashram system is actually a bona fide shelter, we could call it. Because what happens when we're not sheltered? What happens when we're not under the protection or under the care of a bona fide shelter? Well, we start thinking, we start doing, and we start acting in ways where we just think it's just based on our ideas and our conceptions, right? We start thinking, okay, this is right, this is wrong. And instead of following the culture that Krishna's given us, we start just doing what we think, what my mind thinks I should do. Then that thinking, that feeling, that willing comes in. Instead of doing the thinking, feeling, willing based on authority, we're doing it based on our own mind. And Prabhupada calls this capricious work which is whimsical, based on the mood of our feelings, based on the mood of what I think I should do, without permission or without sanction from authority. And we know how dangerous that can be, right? Especially for spiritual life. We know our minds are one of the most powerful tools that we have, if not the most powerful tool we have. That takes us away from Krishna. Our minds can justify, can rationalize, can explain anything and everything if we want it to do that. Just think, just imagine, right? Like, I mean, I don't eat chocolates, but chocolates is a very controversial thing in ISKCON. Yeah? Should we eat chocolate? Should we not eat chocolates? Are we allowed to eat chocolates? Are we not allowed? They've got caffeine in it, but it's okay. Srila Prabhupada ate it. The amount of caffeine is not so much. You know, all the other devotees have it. I'm the only one that doesn't eat it. You know, like this, we can go around in circles. We can rationalize both sides of the argument based on what we want. If we want to eat chocolate, we're going to rationalize. We're going to utilize our mind is just going to naturally find arguments to justify why we should have chocolate. And if we're of the strong camp of no, you shouldn't eat chocolate, then the mind will justify and find ways to argue that point. And sometimes it might even look like we're doing or being Krishna conscious in doing that. But if the intelligence isn't purified, and if the mind isn't following the intelligence, then it might look like it's Krishna conscious. It might look like it's authorized because of these arguments that we can come up with. But actually, it might not be pleasing to Krishna. Krishna's injunctions come from Guru Sadhu Shastra. They're revealed to us by Guru Sadhu Shastra. Right? The Shastras themselves are Krishna, manifestation of Krishna. But to understand Krishna's words, we take shelter of the Gurus and the Sadhus. So we can always, instead of letting our mind come up with, okay, what I should do, how should I do it, we should always just check in with Guru Sadhu Shastra. We can check in to go, is this aligned with what my Guru says? We can check in to say, is it aligned with what the devotees would say or would agree with? If we're doing something and we're thinking, the devotees won't understand this, the devotees won't acknowledge this as service, then we should think, okay, well, is it that the devotees don't understand, or is it the fact that I'm doing something that isn't Krishna conscious actually? And then thirdly, we can check in, like, is it aligned with what the scriptures say? At the end of the day, the Gurus and the Sadhus are aligned to what the scriptures say because the scriptures are given by Krishna himself. So when we focus on the Varnashram system, then we know that it came from Krishna. We know that the Guru, the Sadhus, everybody is very much focusing on, okay, for a social structure, Varnashram system is there. And that's where, when we situate ourselves in Varnashram system, we can be properly sheltered. Because in the Varnashram system, we're also guided and under protection. So that means naturally that we'll be aligned to Guru Sadhu Shastra. And what are Guru Sadhu Shastra there for? It's to help us free ourselves from the material world. Just like the 4 regulative principles that we have, right? Sometimes we call them the 4 regulative principles of freedom. right? Because they're binding, right? We have to control and restrict ourselves to 4 regulative principles. But actually, they free us from the bond of the material world. In the same way, we can see that the Varnashram system is a system of shelter, right? It's a so-called artificial shelter because it's based on, at least from our perception, it's based on things of the material world. It's based on our position in society. It's based on our activities in the world. But actually, that shelter takes us to the ultimate shelter. In the brahmachari ashram, right? One who's situated as a brahmachari, what's their focus? What's their main source of shelter? It's from the guru whose ashram they're situated in. In ISKCON, that could be the temple authority. For a grihastha, what's their shelter? How did they progressively get to Krishna? Well, traditionally speaking, the wife would take the shelter of the husband, who would be treated as the guru, and the husband would take shelter of a bona fide spiritual guru, who then takes him back, and in turn the wife also comes. Now, in modern days, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that its wife is always subservient to the husband. No, it depends on the spiritual potency, the spiritual standing also. Sometimes they could be equal, where the wife is a guru, a shiksha guru in some areas of Krishna consciousness, and the husband in other areas. Because now we have the equal opportunity to learn and study the scriptures together. Then in the Vanaprastha, we see that actually it's a place of transition, right? Where one is going from taking shelter of the family life, the Grihastha ashram, to taking full shelter from Krishna, being completely focused on the shelter of Krishna. And then sannyas is when they've achieved that, when they're fully and completely under the shelter and care of Krishna, where they won't go planning for how they're going to have their 3 meals a day for the next week. They just accept that, okay, if Krishna wants me to eat, then I'll eat today. Now, most of us, I'm just going through the list, most of us on this call are either in the Grihastha ashram, looking to go into the ashram, or maybe we're looking to come out of the Grihastha ashram, right? Starting to enter the Vanaprastha stage. But practically everyone I see, we're all heavily engaged in interacting with the material energy, interacting with earning money, investing in relationships. So yeah, naturally, Grihastha ashram, which means married life, is ultimately where we're at. But in the purport of today's verse, Sri Prabhupada also says how we shouldn't waste our time in material enjoyment and fruitive activities. But instead, we should focus on, as he says in the last sentence, quote, supreme task of attaining the highest perfection of life, namely going home back to Godhead, unquote. So when we're looking at Grihastha life, when we're looking at married life, and we're reflecting on what we're doing in married life, then we might think that actually, is married life not just a fall down in that case? Where, okay, because we can understand that, okay, a married man or a married woman, a family person, basically, we have to engage in fruitive activities. We have to make money. We have to make sure and see to the wife, the kids. We have to see that they're well looked after. We have to see that they're happy at home. And then also we have to engage in activities which are materially enjoyable. Going on holidays, playing with the kids, going to the park, so many different things we have to do. And when we're reflecting, we'll think, oh, this is taking us away from Krishna, isn't it? But whether or not family life is a fall down from spiritual life depends on what we're doing and how we're engaging in that married life. We can imagine a seesaw. There's 2 extremes, right? We've got one which we'll call the Grihastha ashram, which is that mood of family life, that mood of married life, where our focus is on serving Krishna. Then on the other side of the seesaw, we've got what we call as Grihamedi, which is somebody who's involved in family life for the purpose of enjoyment. So what's the difference? When we look at the Grihastha ashram, then the family or the couple, the person, is living in the material world, engaging in what seems like material relationships, like the spouse, the children, the parents, the friends, etc. But their focus is on serving Krishna and expanding the movement. Their focus is on how can I serve Krishna in whatever situation, whatever activity we're doing. For a Grihamedi, they're living in the world, they're living with these material relationships like the spouse, children, etc. And their focus is on how can I maximize my sense gratification? How can I maximize the wider self and the sense gratification of the wider self, like the family, the friends, etc., the children. As a Grihastha, when we come home from work, we're thinking, how can I serve in a way to inspire, engage, enthuse, encourage myself and my family to serve Krishna better? But when a Grihamedi comes home from work, he's thinking, how can I minimize the amount of dutiful activities we have to do so that we can just enjoy time watching Netflix as a family, going out and doing all sorts of things that are palatable to the senses. As a Grihastha, we might go on holiday, but what's our mood? We're thinking, I wonder if we can go to some temples where we're going. How can we serve the devotees when we're there? How can we serve and carry ourselves in a way that attracts the family to Krishna? As a Grihamedi, when we go on holiday, we think, which are the places that we can go to take the best pictures to put on Facebook and get the most likes? Which are the restaurants we can eat in that are like 5-star restaurants so that my senses, my tongue, my family's tongues can be satisfied? And as practicing spiritualists, what should our focus be? Our focus should be that if we've got that seesaw in life as a Grihastham, somehow we've taken up family life, then we should be looking to mold our life in such a way that the weight of the Grihastha ashram, the weight of the focus on engaging ourselves, on inspiring ourselves and the family to perform service to Krishna is always heavier. Ideally, it is completely heavy. As heavy as Krishna, Om Purnam, perfectly and completely heavy. Because that way, then we can be assured that, okay, we're actually performing Grihastha ashram. We're actually practicing the Grihastha ashram. We're not doing something which is taking us away from Krishna. We're actually engaging in activities based on our psychophysical nature, based on the situation we're in, engaging with the world, engaging in relationships. But we're doing it in a way which is liberating us and liberating those around us. And we see Lord Ramachandra was a perfect example of this, and Srila Prabhupada shares the same ideal actually. Right? In the purport of Canto 9, Chapter 10, verse 54, Srila Prabhupada says, quote, "A householder should live according to the ideal of Lord Ramachandra, who showed how to be a perfect person. Being a householder or living with a wife and children is never condemned, provided one lives according to the regulative principles of Varnashram Dharma. Those who live in accordance with these principles, whether as householders, brahmacharis, or vanaprasts, are all equally important." Unquote. So as members of the Grihastha ashram, when we're endeavoring or looking to enter or coming out, when we're endeavoring to be like Lord Ramachandra in his behaviors, in his qualities, then we can see that our mood should be very much like this, right? We should be thinking about how we've been given this great responsibility to look after Krishna's children, whether it's the spouse, the children, the friends, etc. Because all of us are parts and parcels of Krishna. And the mood should be, how can I be an instrument to connect them back to Krishna? Because if we see, then that's what Lord Ramachandra's life was about. His life was about, how can I maximize the social structure of Ayodhya so that everybody is living perfectly in their psychophysical nature in a way which is allowing them to serve the best. He went to find Sita because Sita was not in her proper situation. She was not properly situated when she was in Lanka. Lord Ramchandra wanted Sita as the devotee to become properly situated with Lord Ram and serve Lord Ram. As Lord Ramachandra himself, he went out of his way to do that. And sometimes, especially if the family is not favorable, interested in Krishna consciousness, we might think or feel that we're doing things which are materialistic, right? But our aim shouldn't be to enjoy from that. Our aim should be to always just be an instrument of Krishna's love, an instrument to express love in such a way that they get attracted to Krishna. Because when we come to spiritual life, naturally, especially, at least I can speak from my experience, and I know a couple of other devotees on the call who I've spoken to also, when we come to spiritual life, our family, our friends start thinking, okay, like, you're moving away from us. But when we mature a bit in our spiritual life and we're actually becoming instruments of Krishna's love, then we all have experience where actually those around us are now starting to see that actually Krishna consciousness is helping us relate to them better. And so when we show those around us that our spiritual practices are bringing us closer to them, making us better people, better husbands, better wives, more caring and understanding parents, then naturally they'll get attracted to Krishna because they're getting attracted to us. And all we're doing is just being an instrument, a via medium for them to receive Krishna's love. So instead of thinking about how can I enjoy with them, we can start to think about how can I help them? Instead of thinking about how can I, as practicing spiritualists, we have this mentality, how can I engage them in service, right? My wife, she's not Krishna consciousness, she's not Krishna conscious, but how can I engage her in service? No, what we can think of is, how can I serve them in a way that enlightens them? And then, just conscious of time also, then we come to Yudhishthira Maharaj's current situation, where he's been through all of that. Grihastha ashram, he went through the brahmacharya ashram, the grihastha ashram, now he's coming at a stage where he's accepting the renounced order of life. So we understand that varnashram system is not just about living in married life. It's also about the exit plan from married life. It's also about preparing to renounce family life so that we can fully focus on serving Krishna. And whilst Yudhishthira Maharaj, due to his situation, went almost, it sounds like, practically straight to the sannyas ashram, the varnashram system is merciful because it's given us that vanaprastha ashram. Typically at around 50 years age, if we go according to traditional calculations, then at the age of 50, the parents or the people, the husband, wife, they start to retract themselves from engaging in the material energy. They start retracting themselves from engaging in bodily relationships, in engaging with the children, the grandchildren, etc. They start to focus their life more and more on yatras, on going to spiritual pilgrimages, basically enhancing that spiritual bank balance. And at some point, eventually, the wife will stay at home doing the same sorts of things, practicing spiritual life, and the husband will be the one that goes out, right, on his own, cultivating spiritual knowledge, getting ready and preparing himself to become a good preacher, traveling preacher as a sannyasi, preparing himself for that. And traditionally also, there used to be a case where in the Vanaprastha ashram, when the husband's ready to leave home and give up the association of the wife, then first he would live on the outskirts of the town so that he would be nourished and provided by the family still. So that he's living away from home, but still provided by the family. And then as time goes on and the acceptance is there, the readiness is there, then the family no longer provides, the village provides. And when the husband is ready, then the husband would leave that village and not come back, because then they'd be fully surrendered to Krishna. They'd be fully focused on, okay, I don't know where my next meal comes from, but Krishna will arrange if he wants to arrange. And so as we get older, even if we're looking to enter the Grihastha ashram, it's always good to have a plan of, okay, how am I going to renounce the Grihastha ashram? And so just to kind of bring the whole essence of the Varnashram system perfectly, right, from Srila Prabhupada himself. I quote from one of Prabhupada's purports in the 7th cantos. This is 7.14.10. Quote, the Grihasthas, Vanaprasths, Brahmacharis, and Sannyasis should endeavor together with their total energy to become Krishna conscious. This type of civilization is called Deva Varnashram. One of the objectives of the Krishna consciousness movement is to establish this Deva Varnashram, but not to encourage so-called Varnashram without scientifically organized endeavor by human society, unquote. So the essence is for all 4 ashramas to work together to promote, cultivate, and spread the Krishna consciousness movement, but properly be situated, because it's scientific. It is conducive to our growth in spiritual life. And if we're properly situated, if we're properly following Guru Sadhu Shastra, then we can become that recipient of the empowerment, that recipient of the mercy from the predecessors, from Srila Prabhupada, from the Acharyas, from our Guru. And what is that empowerment going to enable us to do? It enables us to go deeper in our bhajan, in our Krishna consciousness, in our own cultivation, and also in spreading the mission. Achar and prachar both, because when we're following Varnashram system, our achar is very much evident. We don't become duplicitous because we're going, okay, these are the rules of my ashram. I'm based in this ashram, so I won't transgress. I won't pretend to be somebody I'm not. So to conclude, so we see that this verse is very much focused on Yudhishthira Maharaj and how he was a perfect advocate of the Varnashram system, where he lived through the Brahmachari life, the Grihastha life, and now he's looking to renounce the Grihastha life. We talked about how Srila Prabhupada really emphasized this point that human society can only really be called civilized if they're following a social and spiritual structure, which is the Deva Varnashram system, because it helps to progress one in a way where the aim is to please Krishna. And then we talked about how Varnashram system means, in one form, shelter from the material energy, and also shelter from our own negative natures, our own lower natures that cause us to do whimsical activities, that cause us to do capricious work. And then we talked about how to live life as a Grihastha, the battle that we as Grihasthas do face. It's a real battle that all of us will face, or have faced. We want to focus on spiritual life, but then we have to look after the kids. We have to take the kids to school. We want to focus on reading, but we have to engage with our spouse to keep them happy. But then I gave the example of the seesaw, where we should always be looking to keep the weight on the side of doing those spiritual activities, have that spiritual mood. And then finally, we talked about how the Deva Varnashram system means that actually, yes, you might be in Grihastha ashram today, but there should be a plan to renounce later on, to fully focus ourselves on Krishna consciousness and preaching the mission. And in that way, Yudhishthira Maharaj we see is an example of this, because now that Krishna's pastimes have finished on earth, now that Arjuna has expressed his own desires, Yudhishthira Maharaj is now thinking, now is my time to renounce household life. And now is my time to focus on Krishna and only Krishna. So then that, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. What an excellent class today. And so practical, because this is what we need, because we are all at different stages, and dovetailing our activities so that all our activities are Krishna conscious is so, so important. And it couldn't have been said in a better way than you said today. Are there any other questions or comments or any additions? I think if we are just taking our children to school, maybe we could dovetail that and say, I'm taking Krishna's children to school so that they become responsible individuals. Or I'm taking my wife to the cinema. I don't know how to dovetail that, but
See, it comes to a point that I was mentioning also, though, right? Because if say the partner is not Krishna conscious at all, right? Maybe they're not even inclined to Krishna consciousness. Then naturally we have to do things that also please them.
Yeah.
But if we show that Krishna isn't taking us away from them, then that naturally attracts them more. Because I remember there's many senior devotees that share different stories from different like devotees in similar situations. And I just remember this one comes to mind right now, which is where there was a devotee, a very staunch devotee of Krishna. He would go, before marriage, he would go to ISKCON temple every single day. And he got married to a pious Hindu person who liked to go to temples. And so, okay, it was like, okay, they got married and they would go for a couple of weeks to the ISKCON temple because that's where he wanted to go. But he found out, like they were talking and she mentioned how she doesn't really like it in the ISKCON temple. She feels it's a bit too strong. She only likes it in like Hanuman temples and like other normal temples. So he said, that's okay, right? For a whole year, he never went to an ISKCON temple. He still had his practice. I'm not advocating this, by the way, because that's his level of Krishna consciousness, that he was able to do this. But for a whole year, he never went to an ISKCON temple. He never talked about Krishna consciousness to her. He continued his practice. He continued his reading, his chanting in his own time. After that year, she herself was like, oh, we haven't been to the ISKCON temple. Like, see, that level of love for the spouse is what attracted her. Like, he gave up doing something he did every day. He could have gone, no, this is my Krishna consciousness. How can you do this? I have to keep going. Even if you don't come, I don't care. I'm going to go. But we end up going, no, you have to come. You know, you have to come with me. It's good for you, you know. But here is love winning over. Like, if we look at it, what does Krishna want? Krishna wants us to love him. He could have forced Arjuna after the 18th chapter to go, now I've told you all of this, just listen to me and do exactly what I said. But no, he says, I've given you everything. I've given you all this transcendental knowledge. Now it's up to you what you do. Because Krishna wants that love. He wants us to choose him. But what do we do as devotees? We're forcing our choice on those who aren't Krishna conscious around us. But if instead we offer Krishna consciousness, we present it, and then leave it to them to pick up, but we continue to shower our love on them, being instruments of Krishna's love, then they'll come. So sure, go to the cinema with the wife, but don't go, like I said, in the mood of enjoying the movie. Go in the mood of expressing that love so that she can see that, hey, you know, like he's got his Krishna consciousness, but he's not neglected what I want. And then maybe a couple of months, a year later, she'll be like, I don't want to go to the cinema. I want to go to this temple. But again, I do not advocate not going to a temple. That is very bad for us. He was at that level of Krishna consciousness that he could sustain without association. I can speak for myself. A week without association, and I would already be going downhill. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Prabhuji. Any other questions or comments? If there are no more questions or comments, I can hand over to Bhaj Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Is it possible for you to end this session?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for your nice class. We're talking about the renunciation, about the household lives. We can learn from the lesson of the life of the Yudhishthira Maharaj, how you are talking in this first beginning of the class. That is the time, place, and circumstance. The instruction is supposed to be different in the understanding. The first he told, you're supposed to be quiet and thinking upon me. And here you're supposed to be renunciation because your role is over. So that is the instruction or lessons we can supposed to learn from the scriptures. How there is a 4 varna and 4 ashram is prescribed in our scriptures. Everyone is supposed to be follow that one. Not supposed to be too much entangled with the material life, and whole entire life is supposed to be give up our attention to fulfill the desires and also fulfill our grandson and grandchildren desires also. That is very foolish things. Also Prabhupada giving this comment, this is no one should follow the suicidal policy of neglecting one's supreme task of attending the highest perfection of life. If you are doing that, it's called the suicide policy. So we're supposed to check that one and go for the higher purpose, because human life, already you told, this is some specific goal and some specific purpose, not supposed to be spoiled for the silly things. So thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your nice class. Hope it will be helping us to understanding better what is the value of the human life, what is the aim of the human life. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your nice class. Also, thanks very much for all the our devotees assembling here in the Bhagavatam Katha. So I request everyone, please unmute yourself and chant Hare Krishna mantra for glorification of His grace and Bhaj Govindam, Prabhuji. Please join. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna, Krishna,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Vancha kalpa yasya sindhu bhayavata
Patitanam
Vaishnavyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His grace Bhaj Govindam Prabhu ki jai.
ISKCON Eldred ki jai.
Prabhuji, just stay on for 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.